I'm Jeffrey Friedman, and I'm delighted to be here today with Lindy Snider and Riley Cote. Both are founders of the nonprofit organization Athletes for Care. Lindy is also a member of the organization's board of directors. Welcome, Lindy and Riley.
Thanks for having us.
Athletes for Care was created by athletes for athletes. The organization provides a variety of athlete-developed programs and services specifically tailored to the needs of athletes. These programs and services also assist retired athletes in finding opportunities and a sense of purpose outside of sports, which is often the only world they have known. Lindy, what led you to be one of the founders of Athletes for Care?
Having grown up in sports and counting many players as family members, I was able to really understand firsthand what life after sports was like, and became very concerned when I noted that many players were very disenfranchised. Leaving a team is like leaving a family. And not only did they leave the work that they've known all of their lives, but all of the support systems and resources that went with that. And so we saw many players who, again, like I said, were like family, suffering in some ways from a sense of loss of identity and subsequent depression, and not quite knowing what they were going to do with their lives next. And it felt very important to be able to offer resources and services to people who had done so much for us, for the public. They've been out there during their careers in the community, going to hospitals, mentoring kids, and then they were sort of just left on their own when they finished playing, and it felt unfair, and I felt that I could do something about it.
Riley Cote is a Canadian former professional ice hockey left-winger and former assistant coach for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms of the American Hockey League. He played 4 National Hockey League seasons with the Philadelphia Flyers and was mainly known as an enforcer. Riley is also the National Hockey League ambassador for Athletes for Care. Riley, what led you to be a founder of Athletes for Care?
With my background as a professional athlete and athlete in general, I understand the daily grind of being an athlete, a current athlete as well as a retired one, and the challenges that it entails. When I retired, I discovered a new path of healing, alternative healing methods, botanical healing, nutritional healing, understanding cannabis and hemp therapies, and I became extremely passionate about it. Lindy and I had talked about it for a couple of years. I had a couple of other people that I'd been working with and being on panels with at different conferences, and it just made total sense. Hearing stories from other athletes and talking to them and picking their brains. It's all relative, no matter what sport you play. Guys are hurting, guys are managing pain, guys are facing with anxiety and depression issues and sleep issues, all kinds of challenges. And the biggest one I find is the lack of identity and purpose, and we're trying to kind of glue these things all together with cannabis and hemp, but not exclusively. There's much more to the healing realm than that, and we want to push the meditation, the yoga, the restorative exercises, again, the botanical healing, and getting back to the natural ways and managing our bodies that way. So lots to do, lots of players to help, and it's a positive thing. We're excited to get this thing going.
Why is the organization so important for not only retired athletes, but also the general public?
The problems that these athletes are facing is not unique to only pro athletes. I mean, there's many people who suffer depression or substance abuse. I think what we're excited about is that not only do we want to advocate for better mental health, use of alternative therapies when that's appropriate, but to funnel funding into research. One of the first initiatives that we will really focus on is traumatic brain injury. CTE falls under that category. And what we hope to do is to continually be funneling dollars into different research areas that affect the public. So naturally, a TBI, traumatic brain injury, would be one. Substance abuse, the opioid epidemic is on everybody's minds. That's a national problem. And the notion that we can get behind that, help fund research in that area, be advocates in that area, be mentors and a voice for kids coming up the pike is really an exciting opportunity. And these players are fully aware that, you know, they're heroes. And they're heroes still to so many young people. And the fact that they can have a voice that leads them to make better choices, I think, is a phenomenal opportunity for everybody.
Riley, having been there yourself, what do you see as the most significant problems facing retired athletes?
Geez, it's a good question. There's a few of them, and mainly the mental health issues and addiction issues I find being the precursor for just more dark places that these players land up going. And it usually starts with an acute injury, blown out MCL, knee, or whatever it is, and then you get into the pills, then you get into that deep dark cycle. And a lot of these guys, alcohol, opioids, and whatever else they can get their hands onto, substance abuse problems. It just that's the way they manage their anxiety and their lack of purpose. So the mental health to me is the one that strikes a chord. And you know, the physical body is great. That's your vehicle as an athlete. But once you're done playing any sport, you have to reconnect to society and, you know, the daily struggles that, you know, the average Joe face. And you've had your hand held the whole time when you're playing. You know, pro hockey, minor league hockey, someone's kind of telling you where to go, where to be, what to wear, and everything's kind of provided for you. All the resources are provided for you. And then you got to face the real world, and then you got to find the right direction. So that's what we're there to do, is help guide these guys, give them different resources, and just an overall support system.
Who are some of the other athletes who are a part of Athletes for Care?
We got a bunch of guys on board now. We got UFC fighters from you know, Boss Rutan, Frank Shamrock, NFL guys. We got Evan Britton, Nate Jackson, Jim McMahon, Eugene Monroe, Jake Plummer, just to name a few. NHL guys, we got Darren McCarty, Kenny Linsman, and we're constantly, you know, reaching out and getting guys on board, because without this resource, these guys are left to figure this out on their own.
Lindy, Athletes for Care provides programs, research, education, and advocacy. Can you provide us with a brief overview of these?
Yes, so the exciting thing about the different programs that are being built within the organization is that they're player-driven. We have players that really are working on creating a support group within the organization, working on health and wellness, yoga, alternative medicine. Some of the programs we're working on are business accelerators, so that we can teach these athletes about business principles, not only how to invest, you know, how to read a business plan, how to launch their own businesses. We are putting together a really terrific advisory council that can help guide them through some of these types of programs.
Riley, I know you're passionate about the many health and medical benefits of cannabis, and the advocacy for the use and benefits of cannabis was a major reason that Athletes for Care was founded. I understand that cannabis helped you survive your hockey career.
You know, when I first got introduced to it, it was in very recreational settings. But I soon found when I didn't consume with other intoxicants like alcohol and pills, that it gave me a ton of relief. It helped me sleep, it helped manage my pain. And in the fighting world, I was fighting, you know, 30, 35 times a year. It was certainly helping with my anxiety. When you're fighting guys like Donald Brashear and George LaRocque on a daily basis, you know, anxieties are high, much higher than just the general performance anxiety. So I noticed a huge relief, and it resonated with me. So it's always something deep within my soul that I knew was real. It had that, you know, deep-seated passion, but I had kind of kept it to myself. But it wasn't until, you know, I retired that you know, the science started backing up what I was feeling, and you know, fighting that much, understanding the neuroprotectant properties of, you know, cannabinoids and neurogenesis properties of cannabinoids, that it all started making sense, and just, you know, just kind of fueled my passion for it. You know, I started understanding and, you know, consuming the CBDs as a, you know, a daily wellness regime, removing the inflammation and just helping my body recover. I always, you know, call, you know, cannabis and hemp a recovery tool. It's work versus recovery, and you're trying to put your body in a state of a relaxation, manage stress, manage anxiety, and help promote sleep. You know, if your sleep cycle's off, your recovery cycle's off. So as an athlete, that's what you're looking for, and just as an average person, you're just trying to heal, you're just trying to recover. And without my experience consuming cannabis, I'm not sure I'd be well versed enough to be, you know, being this confident about my stance on it.
There are numerous medical and health benefits of the cannabis plant. Can you tell us about some of these, especially those that are beneficial for retired athletes?
What Riley just described is their key points. As a way to get off substances such as alcohol and opioids, it's been shown in just about every state where cannabis has been legalized for medical use that there's been almost a 25% reduction in opioid deaths. And this has happened naturally without sort of a grand effort to replace opioids with cannabis. It's just happened in an organic way. I mean, so that's a very obvious and very critical benefit. Again, not just to retired athletes, but to everybody. And you know, there's a growing body of evidence that now supports some of the claims that have been only anecdotal up until now. I mean, I would get into a long litany of the ways I think it benefits people, but the list is so long that it's almost impossible to describe. But I think what's really important is that people who want to understand it should spend time reading about it, looking at the new evidence. We heard about the evidence initially with children, especially with epilepsy. And you know, what has grown from that is the realization that there's so many benefits to so many different types of conditions. So whether it's specifically to the professional athlete or the amateur athlete or just the guy at home that's working out and gets injured or sore, or, you know, there's definitive help to be had with cannabis plant.
You know, cannabis and hemp is an obvious healer. I mean, we're gravitating towards it forever, and people are seeking it, and people are seeking alternatives to the traditional therapies. So we're trying to provide different layers to healing.
I've had the direct experience to see how this plant has benefited my loved ones. When both my mother and my father were dying of metastatic cancer, I was able to witness firsthand how cannabis helped them. And it was pretty extraordinary. My father, towards the end, was necessarily on a lot of pain medicine. He was at that point where treatment was no longer an option. It was just management of symptoms and pain. A hospice nurse, said, "You really should try cannabis." We were in California at the time, so of course it's legal there. Not only did it ease some of his pain, it also eased his anxiety. It helped with the GI problems. It completely eradicated the nausea. It brought back his appetite. That's 5 different things that happened with one single medicine. And that was sort of the aha moment. And in terms of sports, you know, you see this, as Riley mentioned, this pain cycle that begins while they're playing. Injury, subsequently the need for pain management so they can get back on the ice and play. It might be post-surgical pain or whatever. And so they necessarily need to have pain management that begins this terrible cycle. So, I mean, there's no question that this is a valuable medicine. It's a valuable alternative for pain management to get players back on the field or on the ice faster, as opposed to the typical opioid medicine, which creates this cycle that we're seeing all over the place. It doesn't make sense to not be looking at alternatives. It makes no sense not to look.
Riley, as a professional hockey player, you fought on the ice. Now you're fighting a battle on the policy front to enable athletes, and for that matter, all Americans, to benefit from the cannabis plant.
Yeah, I think you know, the advocacy is huge. I mean, we need to push the education. We need to, you know, continue to, you know, bring the science out and show people this is a healing plant. I've done a lot of work since I retired. I founded the Hemp Heals Foundation when I first retired, and you know, mainly promoting hemp as a viable and renewable resource, agricultural crop, and just promoting the healthy benefits, sustainability, and you know, the economic impact locally that it has. You know, I think serving people and trying just introducing people to cannabis. I always see cannabis as a connector plant, and people seem to resonate well with stories, specifically with athletes. And If we can get out there and we can speak the good word and guide people to, natural alternatives to the medications and therapies that they're currently on, I've done my job, and as an organization, especially Athletes for Care, we've done our jobs. If there's no education, there's not going to be a market for this in the business side. At least not a sustainable one. I think people are still fogged out by the laws and policies, and I think that's on purpose. But we have to continue to promote and educate, and that's what Athletes for Care is all about.
Riley, you use the terminology active lifestyle cannabis user. What exactly is that?
Well, I guess it's somewhat deeply layered, but I always look at cannabis as a preventative. It should be sold as preventative medicine. I mean, it should be a dietary essential. We should be juicing cannabis leaves and juicing hemp buds and eating hemp seeds and hemp shakes on a daily basis, feeding our endocannabinoid system. And then maybe we won't be as sick down the road that we are requiring all these medications and then seeking, the magic bullet type of medicine. I think it's much bigger than just, giving someone the alternative. I think it starts on the front end. I think it starts of, removing the inflammation before the inflammation comes, promoting wellness, again, recovery process. We want to stimulate and remove anxieties before they come. We want to promote sleep before we have, sleep issues. And just overall well-being. I mean, there's a sense of focus, spirituality within cannabis that most people don't talk about. We always talk about medical, recreational, but I think people gravitate towards this plant because it speaks to them somehow, in some way. It's been part of us since the start of time, and it's been our ally. So I mean, it's our job to learn from history and bring this thing back the way it was supposed to be.
Clearly, cannabis education and advocacy are important issues for Athletes for Care. What other alternative forms of therapy is the organization supporting, since it's not just about cannabis?
The big ones land up being nutritional healing, so really kind of focusing on an anti-inflammatory diet. We talk about anti-inflammatory properties of cannabis and hemp products, but food also offers these types of healing properties as well. I mean, I think Hippocrates said it 3,000 years ago, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And then again, reconnecting to your inner spirit and finding your identity would be something like meditation and yoga. As an athlete, you spend your whole life stiffening up, stressing out. As a hockey player, crouched over, football player, crouched over, intense, stressed out positions. Yoga, is the opposite of that. It's a recovery tool. It helps lengthen the muscles, open up the muscles, and kind of do basically the opposite of what you've been doing your whole life. So those types of things offer healing on a physical level as well as a mental and spiritual level. And then other botanicals. I mean, cannabis isn't the only plant on this on this planet that offers healing properties. I mean, there's many more, and that's how we've healed since the start of time. So it's kind of reconnecting to our natural roots and ourselves and seeking these alternatives. Again, we're kind of living in this box of a big pharma, and I think that there's a much bigger world, much bigger healing world out there if we just listened to it and explored it. So, the job of Athletes for Care is to introduce some of these athletes that might not have ever thought about doing these things. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys have the same mentality I had when I was playing. It's like that meatball mentality. It's just like more is better, heavier is better. And you know what I mean? I'm not going to tell anybody about my pain. And you know what I mean? That couldn't be further from the truth. You have to address these problems. You have to have a platform to communicate with players and a resource to communicate with players and to get the information. Without that, you're on your own, and you're left to seek this out and find this yourself, and it's not that easy.
Thanks, Lindy and Riley, for spending a few minutes with me today. I look forward to hearing more from you as Athletes for Care continues to grow as an organization. To view information on Athletes for Care, please go to their website, www.athletesforcare.org.